Live stream, got it. It's now being live streamed. And Mr. Tanzi is in the process of logging on. We'll just give him that chance to get on here. Is he?
He must be in. There's no heat there. Look at him.
He's in the fourth floor artist. He's in the fourth floor artist.
Hmm?
He's in the fourth floor artist.
Oh.
Attorney Galvin, I see him. What's going on?
Hello, hi Rob.
Going on? We're waiting for Mr. Tanzi. I know he was, I just got off the phone with him. He is dialing in, or he's logging in. I don't know where he is at this moment. All right, again, and for anybody just logging in, we're waiting for one board member to log on, and I'm just going to give him a few more minutes, and then we're just going to start and let him log in as time goes on. Still don't see him. Still don't see him. Going through, I just saw him. Building Inspector Tom Rubel, how you doing, sir?
Doing fine, Mr. Chairman.
All right, all right, I get 6:33, so I'm going to start this meeting. All right, for the record, all board members and associate board members are going to be participating remotely. That would be myself, Rob Rosa. We got Robert Baker Sr., we got Robert Baker Jr., we got Timothy Haynes, and we got a Stephen Galley. As soon as he gets here, Greg Tanzi will also be participating remotely. And something that is already on everybody's screen, and we already know this, but I forget to say it every once in a while, just so everybody knows. This public meeting is being recorded, so everybody be on your best behavior. Rules for the meeting that we're going to start adopting. Anybody that wants to speak in the name bar for Zoom has to have your full name. This Nancy's iPad, this Greg, yeah, you got to log out and you got to log in with your full name. Let's see. Still don't see a Mr. Tanzi, so all right, here we go. I would entertain a motion to open the public meeting.
Motion to open the meeting.
I got a motion. I need a second. Mr. Baker, there we go. I got a second. Roll call. Myself, yes. Mr. Baker Sr.
Yes.
Mr. Baker Jr.
Yes.
Mr. Haynes?
Yes.
All right. I still don't see a Mr. Tanzi as of yet, but I'm not too worried about it.
Mr. Rosa,
Right.
make sure you just indicate who's participating remotely. I know that it might be obvious, but I want to make sure that someone isn't upset and misunderstanding that this is all remote.
No, that's understood. I'm going to do that. I did that in the beginning. I'm going to do that again. All board members and associate board members are participating remotely. That would be myself, Rob Rosa. That would be Robert Baker Sr., Robert Baker Jr., Mr. Timothy Haynes, and Mr. Stephen Galley. There you are, sir. And as soon as he gets in here, we're looking for a Mr. Greg Tanzi. I don't see him as of yet. So again, welcome everybody to the January 18th, 2022 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I hope everybody made it through the holidays safe and happy, and everybody had a good year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the public notification, remotely conducted continuance public hearing on the petition filed under Chapter 40B comprehensive permit by Shingle Mill LLC, care of Conoco, 41st Street, Bridgewater, Mass. 02324, to allow the construction of 236 units of residential housing, the project, within 2 5-story buildings on approximately 29.33 acres of land located at 0 Pond Street and 152 Wilson Street, also known as the site. The applicant is proposing 25% of the units to be classified as affordable as per Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. The site is located on 0 Pond Street, Lot 13, Map 9, and 152 Wilson Street, Lot 68 on Map 10. A copy of this application materials, plans, and other documents are available upon request electronically from the town clerk by dialing 781-871-1874. Press 1 for the town hall, then option 6 for the town clerk's office. Okay. All right, where we at? We got new plans to look at. I saw a comparison plan, a colorized plan, a comparison plan, and we have new architectural renderings to take a look at. Mr. Lincoln, I see you. Who's going to be taking the lead for you, or are you going to be taking the lead?
I'll take the lead.
All right, talk to me.
All right, thanks for having me. So as you can see from the plans, I don't know if anybody can share the plans, Chairman.
Yeah. Do you have your engineer available that he can share the plans?
We do. Yeah, before you do that, Damian, let me just kind of step back a little bit and run through what we've been doing for the last couple of months. Obviously, the biggest carry was the architects, which is kind of driving most of the rest of the project. So as you know, I'm using a different architectural firm, somebody I've worked with before, and I kind of like their work, very creative. We mentioned or we at least discussed what some of the issues were, with the prior plans. I mentioned in the last meeting, I didn't, personally, I wasn't fond of them. So we went through the floor plans first, made several changes there, but honestly, it didn't. You guys probably aren't as concerned with the interior floor plans.
I'm going to check you on that. We are going to be very concerned about the interior floor plans.
Okay,
all right. Especially if we're looking at diminishing the number of units. So that is something that we are going to be concerned with. So,
okay. So second, what I was referring to there was we didn't think the other plans really complied with some of Mass Housing's requirements. Specifically the % of the 3 bedrooms. But anyways, we cleaned some of that stuff up. Some of it was just kind of a personal personal choices with the way things laid out. So we did lose about 10% of the units, which if you're looking at the renderings, all got taken off that top floor. So what BKA did, architects, is they created a lot of green roof around the remaining units on the top floor. So we chopped 22 units, 24 units actually. So we went from 236 to 212 Added a lot of green roof to kind of soften the elevation, on the top. And I don't have a landscape architect that has kind of jumped into the rooftop at this point, but that won't take long. We'll have that ready for the next meeting. And what we did on, I'll call it the L building, the bar building, I flipped that. I never really liked the way the other folks had the mass of the L building towards Wilson Street. It should have been flipped and towards Hingham Street, which is what we've done in this floor plan. Again, everything's trying to kind of soften the massing of the building. The straight building over there really didn't change much. Architecturally it's changed a lot, but I didn't really change the layout at all. And what we've done is I've also reduced, and this probably won't get a lot of claps, but I dropped the parking ratio down to 1.55, which is more than what I'm doing on other projects, but it's less than what Ty and Bond was doing. They had like a 1.9 parking ratio, which, at least in my experience, is a ton of asphalt, empty spaces. Because we're taking a little different tact on the stormwater, we're taking, there was a really big pond up on the Home Depot side of the site. That's all getting buried underneath the parking lot. So that's going away. And there's nothing over on the Wilson Street lot, the little house that I bought over there at the end of Wilson Street. Right now, I've just left that as green space. We do have the ability to run the parking on that Wilson Street lot if everybody thinks we need some more parking. But right now it's not on the plan. We've cleaned up a lot of the parking. We didn't like a lot of the parking. That's more just, turning radius and parking layout, but, and some of that still might change a little bit. I saw the fire chief's letter there, and we don't have any problems with that. Most of the stuff that he was speaking to inside the building, we do as a matter of course. We still need to get with, the fire folks just to make sure that we've got signage and, all the turning radius stuff locked down tight. But again, we'll do that as well before the next meeting. So a couple of just really quick statistics so I don't make people's eyes bleed. The new plan, the impervious surface, so buildings, parking lots, sidewalks, and so forth, that's been reduced about 20%. This might be more Conservation Commission, but I know you guys are concerned as well. The 25-foot buffer impact. So any kind of grading, whether it's impervious or not, has been reduced by about 80%. So there is still some impact inside that 25%, but obviously it's been drastically reduced. And the entrance geometry. So we didn't change, traffic, everybody was happy with. Well, it was reviewed by your peer review engineer. And I know there was probably 2 or 3 iterations of that, but we didn't change the entrance at all because we thought the entrance worked. Wilson Street is just emergency vehicle use only. Some kind of collapsible gate or chain or whatever the fire department wants, but it's not for residents at all. And the improvements to Wilson Street and some of the abutting streets, we had agreed to go in and mill the streets and repave and everything. That stays the same. The Pond Street widening and the turn lane into the industrial, all that stuff stays the same. So none of mitigation, I guess, quote unquote, that all stays the same. The amenity areas, I thought Ty and Bond and Jones Street did a good job, with some of the trails and walking dog areas like that. That all stays the same. There is a lot of land out here, so there should be plenty of room for amenity, much more so than what I've experienced on some of my other projects. So I think that's it, Chairman. I know this is still a work in progress. Before the next meeting, all we have left to do is really the meat on the bones, I'll call it, is just stormwater. So your peer review folks can sink their teeth into some of the the engineering details. But at least the concept is, at this point won't change. But we'll need another at least 3 weeks or so to nail the engineering and, to submit to Pat and whomever else. So I think that's it.
All right, that sounds decent, a lot of decreases. We haven't seen anything. So if there's a way that you can put the plans up and say everything that you already said again, so we can see on paper what we're talking about.
Sure. Damien, you don't have the renderings, do you?
I do have the renderings. I will
Okay.
screen share those for you.
Probably start with those.
All right, is everybody looking at my screen?
Oh, there we go. Something's happening. There we go.
I got it going.
So this is probably the cleanest shot. And as you can tell, it's from the far side of the site looking towards Pond Street. And off to the left there, towards the building, you're looking on the other side of the buildings, and the L is Home Depot way over there, Hingham Street. As you can see, the entrance profile really hasn't changed. The rooftop has changed a lot. The building elevations have changed a lot. The texture, the siding and the materials used, like a cedar shingle type, that's all changed. And then the rooftop has changed dramatically. So as you can see, at least from the Wilson Street, which would be way over to the right, as you're looking towards a building, you'll just see the end of the building over the trees. That's also why the architects and myself created most of the rooftop green space on that side. We designed in solar, which is what I've been doing on a lot of the projects, and that'll feed the electric vehicle stations and all that kind of stuff. But I guess you'd call those penthouse suites or something like that on the top. They'll be nicer units, but it has dramatically reduced in my opinion, the massing of the whole project.
Let me know if you want to look at anything else, Rick.
I'm sorry?
Is there anything in particular that you want me to show the Home Depot?
Maybe the next, whatever you have next in line there is fine. So, well, I saw it there for a minute.
Yeah.
So that's looking from basically the Hingham Street side or the north side, looking down into like the south towards Wilson Street. So you'll see the L obviously is at the you know, the heavily wooded side of the site. And then the, you know, the straight building there is pushed back as far as we could push it. Again, kind of reduce the massing, but it does give you a sense for just general parking layout, access, you know, available to the fire folks. So that big angle right there, the big square of green grass, you know, in the prior plan, that was all like, you know, in my opinion, kind of a massive stormwater pond. The pond itself wasn't that big, but by the time you got through with all the grading and the berm and everything else, it was big. So now the challenge for the engineers is, you know, they're going to bury all that stuff. So that's that. There's a massing. I mean, my architects didn't like the prior massing. They didn't think it was all that accurate, but I'm not, you know, I'm not a graphics expert, but they were saying this one is scaled correctly, I guess, in their terms. So it does give you a good sense coming out of the off the highway there, the Home Depot, BMW gallery, or whatever whatever it is over there. It does give you a sense for what the buildings will look like over the trees. So that's a good visual of parking. You can see Wilson Street coming up off the right. Decided to leave the outbuilding there, the amenities building. One of my versions had another L coming off the build, a really, you know, like a 1.5 story L, but we just decided that wasn't the right approach, you know. So I left that building, you know, moved it a little bit. We've got parking in front of it, and it's close to the apartment units. And you can see on the bottom there, yeah, right where Damien's got his, that parking used to go way down, and you can see the lot over to the right, you know, the house. That's what I meant before by, you know, we eliminated all that area there. We can add some, you know, if people aren't comfortable with a 1.55 or whatever it is on the parking ratio, but next meeting, I do have some data from some of my other developments, but you know, there's something I'm doing up in the Mattapan, Boston area, but just to give you a sense for how I've fared on other projects and what the parking was like and stuff. So, but that's a good visual right there. It's a little, you can see the green rectangle is where the other gentleman had their bar, and, you know, we just flipped it to the other side. So I think that's that.
Would you like to discuss?
Well, can you, yeah, just kind of fly through here real quick, and then I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions.
Just run through the general plans?
No, I'm
Okay.
good with the plans. So,
Yeah,
I think that's it, Chairman. You can see, you know, the main access in Wilson Street and everything else, like I mentioned before, hasn't really changed at all.
No, it's understood. Are you proposing those same trails going out in the back, or?
Yes, yeah, my intent is to come in with traverse, you know, with a full-blown landscape architectural plan. So yeah, it's beautiful land back there. So it'd be great for just some walking trails, and that's it. Maybe, you know, maybe a few park benches or something like that, but I don't think anybody wants to see us do too much back there.
No, and it's got to be an amenity. It has to work for the people in there. So
Right.
we'll wait to see what gets designed.
Okay. Plus, there's another, you know, where they used to have the pond up there. You know, it might be a good spot up there in that little, yeah, right there, Damien. That little, yeah. So we might be able to chat about something. I think that's a great spot right there, just because of the proximity to the buildings. So.
Oh, works. Let's see, I'm gonna open that up to, see if I can pull this off here for a second. I'm gonna open it up to the board at this point, if I can get this over here.
You'd ask them to stop sharing.
Well, actually, you know what, Ed, before we do that, before we do that, Attorney Galvin, I wanted to talk to you about this. Did you have anything that you needed to say about this?
Yeah, has Mr. Brennan, is he on the call?
He's
Pepper?
not. I talked to him earlier and he hasn't had a chance to look at any of this. So there was really nothing that he could speak to tonight. So I said, okay, we'll just, if it comes down to it, we'll get him on the call, we can get him on the phone, but he's got no input at this point.
Okay, so let me just kind of run through a list of some of the things that I saw and then update the board. Obviously, I didn't know how the plans were going to change from the prior iteration. A reduction in density seemed appropriate in light of some of the significant issues that we have. I looked at the plans a little earlier today, and then, I just heard what Mr. Lincoln said, and this isn't in any particular order, but this is what I see. I know that there was a planned pump test for a well. There was an order of conditions that was permitted that allowed that to be done. I don't know what the status of that is, but the board needs to know what the status of that is. There is another outstanding request for an order of conditions with the Concom. My understanding in speaking with Mr. Galemi and Marta Nova today was that that's been continued until March. And that has to do with the Zone A water supply issue. And according to Ms. Nova, there are at least 3 tributaries on this property, one of which is definitely a tributary to the reservoir. There's a lower portion of another stream that also appears to be tributary. I think in the meantime, what I was told was there was a site visit with DEP. There was a request to change these tributaries as to be non-contributory to the well, but DEP is apparently not going to change those plans. That's what I was told. So my understanding is they can't put a drop of water into these streams if they're contributory to the reservoir. There's a letter in the file from Attorney Nagel from before, where he basically takes the position that the work here is non-jurisdictional because they're not doing any work in a wetland resource area under the bylaw. Ms. Nova tells me that the work in the buffer zone that's been proposed is actually in a bylaw, is in a resource area which is both local and state, and therefore Concom will have jurisdiction over this matter and is desirous of kind of figuring out this Zone A issue, which ultimately might be a state issue, but it is a local issue. That kind of is where I understand Concom is. I don't know whether the fire department has seen the revised plans, but according to what I see here, the parking spaces, according to the plan, are all 9 by 18 spaces, which are considered compact. Our bylaw requires 10 by 20 spaces with a 23-foot backup. I think if we scale off those plans, there's some potential issues there. With respect to the landscape plan, obviously you're going to need an updated landscape plan to know what that whole situation is. And I know that Mr. Brennan's going to want to look at the stormwater, and then their domestic water supply issue will all be dependent on the results of this pump test and whether there's any impact on the reservoir. So those are the kind of the off the cuff remarks that I have.
Thank you, Attorney Galvin. I appreciate that. I'm gonna go right into the board. And I know Kim told me who was voting, but I don't see it here. Kim, can you remind me who's voting?
It's yourself, Greg Tansey, Tim Haynes, and Robert Baker Senior.
All righty, so thank you. I appreciate that. So what I am going to do is, who's first in line? Mr. Baker Senior, the most vocal of us all. You're up.
Yeah, I mean,
Couple of quick ones here. At the entrance on Pond Street, we're gonna take the guide rail out. Are you gonna curb the guide rail back into the property to keep any cars from going over the embankment?
This is Rick.
Yes, correct.
Is that it, Damien?
Yes.
so this is the time bond plan. Our entrance, we're in, it's going to match this very similar. But this is from the time bond that was previously shown.
Right, you're gonna end the guide rail by cutting it off, but are you gonna curb that around?
So you can
The
see right
entrance-
here, this line right here is the guardrail. If you're cutting here, right? So these dots along the edge of the curb right there, our
Right.
plan will match that. Same thing on the back side over here, where, I mean, this looks like it extends down the entire roadway. So we will be curbing it, if that is the answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. On that supplement page 12, you had up there with all the parking and stuff on it, red and blue, and could you
Looking
pull that up?
for this one?
Yeah, this
the
is
red and
fine.
blue color. Yeah, this is fine,
Oh.
but you were asking for the colorized one.
Yeah. You have Cedar Street as a, unapproved street, improved street. Who owns that street? Who actually owns that property?
Rick, do you want to handle this or what? I mean,
Probably Walter. I know that was discussed with both Rockland Town Council, I thought, and then Jones Street Town Council. And Walter, do you know the answer to that?
So I don't remember, and we have the information and we can get it to you. The Jones Street had their title insurance company do quite a bit of title work on that area. The conclusion was that the developer, meaning Rick, the owner of this property, had the right to make the improvements shown on this plan, including within Cedar Street at the lengths that it's being made. But I don't remember, just because I don't remember off the top of my head, who they concluded had actual fee ownership.
Can we actually, before we go any further, can we actually go to a different plan that actually shows shows what you're proposing over those two streets? There we go. There we go. Okay, that had, Mr. Baker, I'm sorry, this one
No,
actually.
this is better because this
So we
shows,
have the information and we can share it with you. They, like I said, they did a lot of title work on it in the back title, and the title company made conclusions that allowed for the improvements to be made. They definitely state in those conclusions who the owner is. I just don't remember. But they're confident enough that they're willing to offer title insurance for the improvements over those two sections of those two streets.
well,
Attorney
But I'll
Galvin,
get you
can
the answer to the owner after the meeting. I just don't
Attorney
have it in
Galvin,
front of me.
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Wouldn't the derelict fee statute apply here?
I don't remember if they came to those conclusions through derelict fee or not. It was so long ago that they did it that I don't remember. But I know the conclusion, and it was reached before Jones Street did the redesign to add the work out there. was that it was owned, that Rick had the right to complete the improvements that they then designed and showed on the plans. That was shown in that previous version that has now been reduced.
Appreciate that,
supposed to
Mr.
be.
McBurney. Attorney Galvin, the question still stands. Wouldn't derelict fee statute typically apply in a situation like this with a private road?
It's hard to say because I don't know when the street was laid out. I don't know whether there was the owner owned both sides of the street. It's impossible to say on the basis of what I have right now. I mean, the derelict fee statute would award the fee to the abutting property owners to the middle of the street with an easement in the other portion of it. But the problem is they just don't know on the basis of the facts whether, the owner reserved the rights in the street or whether it was truly left unspoken for, which would result in the derelict fee statute applying.
Problem is that at this point, they show that Wilson Street is public. I just don't know where it's public to.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that the latter portion of it isn't constructed, so.
Is unconstructed. It's a private road, and again, it was a simultaneous conveyance. So, and they did not retain rights in the roadway. No, excuse me. They did it. They did not specifically retain rights in the roadway.
I do have the plan showing, and I think this was previously an end of Wilson Street public acceptance.
And that makes sense at the end of the end of the last house on the road. So that makes sense.
And this is that property. So that line there shown is, what's on this? Is here.
Yep. So that makes sense. So the end of public acceptance is at the end of Wilson Street. So basically, all that riprap and all that stone that you're trying to put into the roadway is in the public way, and that gate is in the public way.
What I'm getting,
Answer any of your questions?
what I'm getting at is we need to know who owns, who has the rights to the Cedar Street property before we can allow them to put a parking lot or anything there on that private way that it's being called.
Based on what I know of that roadway, and again, the limited knowledge I have on property law, I believe that based on the simultaneous conveyance of the plan, the derelict fee statute would come into play there because, again, they're going to end up owning to the center line. Each abutter, each person that abuts the way is going to own to the center line, and it does not go beyond the Wilson Street property, the end of the corner of the Wilson Street property as it's going down Cedar Street. It's just a matter of who has the right to use it. It's an unconstructed way, so that's where it gets tricky. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I could be wrong. I still think what it really comes down to is who has the right to pass and repass over that. And based on the last design where they were paving over onto Wilson Street, the way that they designed it, there was a pass through all the way down. So if it came down to it, someone, if those people had rights to do it, they could pass and repass on foot, most specifically, down and over. It wasn't blocked. So I think that's why they did it. But again, I hear you, I understand you, and I think we need an answer to that question.
Well, I think we need some more answers to that question.
That's what I'm saying. We need legal answers, not my bare bones interpretation. So, and I'm sorry, I'm looking over on the side. All my people are over here. All my plans are on the one with my camera.
One other question is, you have on the plans, it's showing 2 hydrants in here. Was that cleared by the fire department? Because I don't see anything on here about, in their letter, about any other hydrants.
Mr. Baker, that'll get nailed down tight, before the next session to fire folks.
One other thing you had is there was 2 little islands proposed for snow storage on the red, white, and blue sign. You had one towards Wilson Street.
So that I'm guessing that note right there is from the previous tie and bond plans.
Okay, 'cause I think you're gonna need a lot more snow storage in here.
Yeah.
I concur.
The other thing is, are you aware that this is going to have to be a no salt area? Strictly no salt. So anybody that's doing your snow removal or sanding or salting will not be able to bring a truck in there that has salt in it. Because this is where a lot of that water is gonna end up down the reservoir.
So
And we can't have the
specifically sodium
salt.
chloride.
It would be, I would make it one of the conditions. Do approve this. That would be one of my conditions. And how do we police the no salt district is the zoning enforcement officer. And we could put in the condition that there would be a fine if we found that there was salt being spread on the parking lot in the winter.
That's not unusual, Mr.
Right.
Baker. These days with some of these sites, it's hard to find anything that's not near wetlands. So I've definitely done that before.
And would the board, I mean, I understood, no old road salt, sodium chloride, but would they be open to other, more environmentally friendly substitutes such as calcium chloride and other?
I guess if people wouldn't mind ultimately drinking it, but that's.
Okay, then
I
no.
think there'd be a general hesitancy to allow anything.
Okay. Clarifying.
I think you're right, Bob. That's
Mr.
all I
Baker,
have.
you got it perfect. I appreciate that,
Yes.
sir. I'm coming around the horn. I'm going to, no, you already, no, turn your speaker back on. Mr. Baker Jr., talk to me. Speaker on, there we go.
Thank you. I need these tech reminders, as my kids and grandkids always tell me. Just a couple of follow-up questions on Mr. Baker's points. And please forgive me if some of the questions I ask are somewhat uninformed. I came into this process when the application had been well underway. So forgive me if I need to be brought up to speed on a few things. Is it my understanding that at some point, either in the current iteration of the plan or a prior iteration of the plan, that Cedar Street was supposed to be used for fire access?
No,
No.
no,
All right.
sorry.
Okay. On the question of the 2 fire hydrants, they were placed, and this is based on what I take to be your answer, they were placed without consultation up to this point with the fire department?
The location of the fire hydrants, which I'm gonna see if I can pull up here, adding more fire hydrants is in particular, again, historically, I've been working on this project since before tie and bond. There was one shown here that was in consultation with the fire department for, easy access to, if, anything were to happen in kind of these areas, they could potentially reach out to the wetlands. Additional fire locations in the actual plan sheet. Let's see if I can get to and see what was shown in our submission. I think there was one here. They usually like to have one far, towards the far end again, so they can reach greater extents. Additional fire hydrants. And so this is what I guess the one that's along the access way might have gotten disappeared. But they can reach most of the locations. These kind of fall more in line with what I had previously designed, and that was with fireplace consultation. Granted, as Rick had said earlier, I don't know if they've seen these plan sets specifically. They did have their comment letter. We will be contacting them and working more with them to resolve any hydrant issues.
Okay, but as to the specific current location or proposed location, the answer to my question is no. Okay.
Yes, they are relatively located.
Okay. The pump test that's going to be taking place, if it hasn't taken place already, is that to determine, one, the availability of groundwater to service the development, and two, to demonstrate that any source of groundwater for the development is not coming from the reservoir?
Hi, this is Rick again.
Right.
So the pump test is, we know there's enough supply. The pump drawdown test, if you will, or pump test, is really meant to determine or make sure that there's no surface impact, for instance, in the wetlands. So these piezometers, they call them, they run around and put measuring devices within a radius of the respective pump tests, and they can measure any potential drawdown. We don't think there will be. That's just an opinion, but these wells are 700 or 800 feet down in bedrock. But that is a requirement by DEP. And honestly, I was going to do it in the fall, but we kept hearing that the water department was testing a particular station. The short story is I would prefer to hook up to town water, no doubt. But we'll probably wait on the pump test until I'll probably closer to spring, which hopefully isn't that far off. A couple of months.
I appreciate your confidence that there's plenty of water there. How do you know?
Well, they did some preliminary tests when they drilled the wells, and we've got the engineering demand study, so we know exactly what DEP requires for that bedroom count out there. So the pump test, while it will put a polish on the supply, it's more meant for the study of impact to any surface.
Okay, let me throw a couple of hypotheticals at you, if I may. If it is determined by whatever testing ensues or has already taken place that there is insufficient groundwater, or the supply fluctuates, or that the supply you plan on using is in fact drawing off the reservoir, what do you do for water then?
Well, we would not permit the project until there's adequate water. That's why we suggested, it's most permits are subject to, you get your will serve letters from electric or gas or water or sewer. So you've got to have the utilities or things don't get built.
Speaking along the same lines, have you had any communication from the sewer department as to their ability to serve the project?
Well, we do have a letter, but either Attorney Galvin or Chairman Rose or my attorney can, honestly, it's been so long since I've seen the letter. Water I met with not too long ago, and they've agreed to hook up for fire suppression only at this point. Then I was honest with them too. They asked about why I hadn't done the pump test, and I said, honestly, I was hoping to connect to public water supply and was delaying it as long as I could.
Attorney Galvin, Chairman Rosa, can anyone enlighten me as to the status with the sewer department?
It was a letter agreement which would allow the prior version of the project to connect in exchange for the payment of some money, which was based upon, some type of a negotiated figure with the sewer department. Water, I think I heard what Mr. Lincoln just said, that they do believe that they have sufficient water capacity for fire protection, but that's not for domestic water supply. And I think you've heard us talking about the pump test, but
Yeah.
It's something that is required for us to have to know that there's an adequate water supply that's not going to cause another problem to a wetland area or create an issue at the reservoir. So we have to have that information.
Thank you. Quick question, and I don't know who wants to answer this on the department, on behalf of the applicants. Are the buildings going to be wood framed or metal framed?
Both. Typically, we'll do wood on the structural, and metal on the non-structural.
Okay. So essentially it'll be wood framed?
Right. There's no CMU on it.
Now, the new configuration, the new design seems to have substantially fewer units than was originally proposed. Can you tell me under the new plan how many, and then by number, not percentage, of the units will be considered affordable?
Well, by state law, it has to be 25% affordable, no matter the total number of units.
Right, so
And
25% of what your current plan is how many?
Yeah, yes, sir.
No, I'm asking what 25%, the actual number of units would make up 25%.
It's 212 units, so I'd say, what is that, 53. 53.
Let's see. I just have one question, and this would actually be to Attorney Galvin. Just a procedural question that I'm not familiar with, or the answer to which I'm not familiar with. How can we, as the Rockland Zoning Board of Appeals, act on behalf of a joint municipal waterworks?
Because to the extent you're acting under a local bylaw or regulation, you act in their authority.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Baker Jr. Keeping going around, going to board member Timothy Haynes. Mr. Haynes, talk to me, sir.
Oh, hi. I don't want to beat the dead horse, but I did, in the conversation about Cedar Street, I wasn't clear about a couple of things that came up. One was the previous proposal having a gated emergency access to that way. And then one of the answers we got to that question was no, but I'm under the impression that that was something the fire department wanted. So it's on the overlay plan, the old and new together. So it's still showing from the old plan. And in conjunction with that, that publicly accepted part of the road has a lot of new grading on it. So I'm not clear what's being proposed or eliminated there. So maybe you could just clarify for me, is there going to be emergency access there? Are you waiting to hear from the fire department if they still need it? And is your plan to put the grading that's shown on the grading plan into that public portion of the street?
Well, I'll take the easy one. So I know the fire department still wants it. I won't put words in their mouths, but they've always, that's generally the case, right? Just a secondary way in and out. The grading, Damien, I don't know if you can comment on that.
Yeah, so I mean, the grading is required for the access to bring the site up into. We can tighten it, again, we're just trying to make it safe there. We're calling in, the grade, trying to just step us up so that we can get into the site cleanly and smoothly. I don't know, I think you're talking about access on Cedar Street, that was never proposed. There has always been in the old plans, and this gravel kind of hatched area right here is the access. So yes, that access is still there. And then the grading is tied in that way. If you were to build a road, I would imagine it is a public access way, but we will be, preventing due to fire emergency. There is no access to other sites. So the grading is to provide access to our site, which happens often. I mean, with many sites, you grade at the front of the entrance into public ways and such. It's part of access.
Great clarification. I think I agree with you. It's probably going to be desirable, but it looked like you were making some grading changes to a public way. And that goes to the question of who owns that street at that point, because it's beyond the publicly accepted line. Not there.
Yeah, but it happens that, there is grading and, access done, access is required to get into the site, and it's done in a public way. It happens with any type of development.
Absolutely.
So, of that same thing, grading and access to a development, it happens in the public right away, I guess, is normal circumstance.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm just pointing it out as just to wrap up that conversation from earlier, where there were some conflicts in what was being answered in terms of access, getting fire department access, and improvements. The improvements that Bob was talking about were on the paper road side, but I just wanted to point out that in fact, it is on the public side as well. So just want to make sure that's clear. On this plan, it's the plan you have as numbered as 12, your grading plan. Could you clarify where we're talking about on the upper left side of the plan, on the grading plan? So the plan that I have, that one, could you clarify what's going on with the grading there? Because it wasn't clear to me what's being eliminated over there and how it's level, and whether that's is that now going to be at the grade, the elevation of the parking lots, or is there still going to be that drop off before it becomes level?
Actually, Mr. Haynes, I will probably eat crow on that one right now, because when I saw that, there's obviously a disconnect between the architectural rendering and then Damien's, that's not the plan, Damien.
I was trying to show the differences between what was previously there. You did indicate in your conversations that the grading shown on the architectural plans here aren't clear on the fact that grading does go down. That will be landscaped area along that edge there. It's just we're catching grade as quickly as we can, going down at a safe, normal slope to get into and avoid as much impact into our buffer area as shown.
But we could potentially, right, Damien, we could run that retaining wall that I see down there on that, there, and connect to the other
retaining wall that whole edge
and stay out of the 25 foot. And but that's my bad.
So, yeah, obviously there are some disconnect between the things we were talking about and the rendering and the grading plan. So the reason I wanted clarification on it, besides just the disconnect, is one, to tell you that the architecturals are significantly improved, in my own opinion. They respond to our architectural reviewers' comments. I think the massing is good, the style is great, the materials are vastly improved. So I think that's deserves commendation for what you're doing there. It's just significantly better than the previous architecturals. It responds to those comments, but we have never been able to get any traction on a significant issue, which I thought was going to be resolved in that green space, if that was level on that side. And it's that when we would ask about affordable plans, having enough room for families to live in, for kids to be here, for people of all family dynamics to enjoy the affordable housing that's coming to our community, there's a clubhouse and some dog walking and some outside trails, but we never really got recreational facilities for all ages, and particularly for families, families with kids, places where people have to take strollers or kids who have to ride bikes. And we talked a lot in our hearings about this shortcoming. You've got a very isolated site, and there's no playground. There's no, there's just nothing for all ages. It's got a clubhouse and a half court, and so we even talked about the sidewalk being on the other side of the road so that they could connect and ride back into the neighborhoods. We talked about connections on the surface to ride bikes and to connect into the fabric of the neighboring streets so that kids could visit friends. And none of those things have not been addressed, and it's a real shortcoming of the project. So we still don't have usable outdoor green space where kids and families can be outdoors, out of the apartment. And even beyond parking, when there was a lot of discussion every time we would bring up families, we would get it's all going to be just professionals, and and they're all going to have zip cars. They don't even own cars. And I think the reality is there are required ratios. We're going to have families. The point of affordable housing is all types of people have to live there. So without that additional green space, it's just something I want to remind you that it's been a conversation from the beginning, not addressed. And with all these improvements, that play space, that outdoor, that for kids, this is a wonderful place for adults, but I want to see families have things to do here as well. And then on the subject of units and unit sizes, it's obviously very important to see the architecturals, the floor plans, so we can see the ratio of 1s, 2s, 3 bedrooms, and so on, relative to parking, relative to those amenities. So we do want to see those. So that's it for my questions and comments.
Mr. Haynes, thank you. Question for you. You appreciated the renderings as such?
Yeah, awesome. Really great use of massing, really great. If you can have that much greenery on the roofs and keep it alive, and I think it's just a tremendous improvement.
Nice. I like how they incorporated all the oil spots on the parking lot for all the people that are paying too much for their apartments. They can't afford to maintain their cars. I like how they did that. That's true to life. That's cool. I'm gonna keep going around the horn. Mr. Galley, talk to me.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask about earlier, Mr. Lincoln mentioned that we reduced the parking ratio from the prior document, reduce it to 1.55. And I remember we were talking about parking, and it was kind of a tense thing where we wanted more, and it seemed to be, it seemed like we reached a parking ratio that people seemed to mostly agree on. So the comment he made after that was that this would have, with the 1.55, it would be more than most of his other properties. And later on, he mentioned Mattapan in the Boston area. And my thought about that is, if he's comparing it to Mattapan in the Boston area, that's an area with more public transportation. So I'm wondering if he's comparing this ratio to any other similar projects where most people drive. I mean, if you're going to be a resident of Rockland, they can't go to the supermarket or the gas station. Not that you wouldn't drive to a gas station, but if you wanted to go get a pack of cigarettes or a bottle of soda or something, you can't walk there. You have to drive everywhere. Want to get a gallon of milk? You want to get diapers or whatever? You have to drive everywhere here. So when he says that it's a higher parking ratio than his other properties and projects, is he comparing it to similar populations and areas like Rockland, where you have to drive everywhere? And that's my question.
Chairman, can I?
Absolutely, go for it.
This is Rick. That's perfectly fair question. So, and maybe the Mattapan thing was a mistake, although this particular project does not have public transportation there, although you can walk somewhere and get it, within half of a mile. And City of Boston probably is not a fair comparison, because they've got a parking ratio regulation of 1.0 or less. Now, whether that makes sense or not, I mean, to me, that's a bit arbitrary. So I did 2 projects in Hanover. There's one in Easton. I did one in North Attleboro. The one in Easton is a new permit. And we're aiming for one. The town there actually took a different approach and wanted me to drop the parking because they wanted green space and less impervious. The stuff in Hanover, honestly, there wasn't a lot of input either way. There's one I did next to the Cardinal Cushing, down there across from the Oz. That's like a 1.39 or something like that, 1.4. And I will say that Easton, Hanover is on Webster Street, right on Route 3. And the one I just mentioned next to Cardinal Cushing, all of those have really similar demographics, right? So like almost 60% 2 bedrooms. The balance was 40%, 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. Attleboro was a little bit more of an urban project that I just finished up. 3, 5, and 6-story buildings down there had some covered parking, but again, the parking ratios were similar, and the demographic is similar too. I tend to do the 60% twos, 40%, ones and studios. So that's, my empirical, that's where I'm drawing. That's my experience. And we've not had a parking issue at all, with those parking ratios. So I will say, Mr. Haynes, to back up, I will provide, I agree with the whole amenity thing. I will say that on the, and this relates to parking too, Mr. Galley, is that we've run, obviously we have statistics, on the number of kids in the apartments and everything, because back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, the fear was always kids in the schools and stuff like that. The number of children in these apartments, I don't know whether it's the rental rates or just people in general these days, but you tend not to get any children at all in these developments. I'm not negating the fact that we need more amenities and so forth, but just, at least in my experience, that's what we've discovered. So sorry I digressed a little bit, Big Alley.
Steve, you got any more questions, sir?
No, that's the only question I had open at the
I
time.
appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. I'm gonna round this out with our latecomer, Mr. Greg Tanzi. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll see you're in the closet.
Yeah. Well, my concerns have not changed. My concern about this site, I've got concerns about the parking. I've got concerns about the well. Where are the wells located? Just out of reference.
Yep, that's where all the walking trails were or are.
Or could you show me relative to the site development?
Uh, yeah, down there.
Is there a cluster of 3?
Yes. One or two tend to get used. I mean, DEP requires, a third well.
And when were these installed?
Oof. It's a guess, maybe last year. I mean, with COVID, I mean, so much, could be year and a half. I don't recall, honestly.
So you installed them without an order of conditions?
Yes.
Where is the zone A to the reservoir, the tributaries to the reservoir relative to where those wells are?
I don't know if you have that map, Damien, and honestly, I don't. I'd probably let on-site engineering speak, because honestly, I'm not as well versed with Zone A and public water supply, not the reservoir, but the the 3 wells that we're proposing.
Well,
But they were, but the wells, I'm sorry, the well locations and everything were all approved by DEP before we drilled.
What do you mean approved by DEP?
Yeah, you can't just go out and drill wells with the intention of producing domestic water supply without getting DEP approval. So I hired an engineering firm, not Conoco, it was somebody I used on a lot of pretreatment systems and so forth. And they had to map it all out and provide the information to DEP. And when we had the green light, that's when we drilled the wells as part of our due diligence.
So you got a permit from the DEP to drill the wells?
Yes, sir.
I don't recall seeing any such permits. Can you forward those to the town?
I can call on site. There's a letter, or there is an approval. I don't know if it's like a building permit, but we did have approval.
Approval through the town as well? You keep saying DEP, but.
Well, it was DEP, Chairman, because it's a state permit, the project, the 40B.
Mhm.
And DEP is the one to permit it. It doesn't, it's just like a pretreatment system on a project, and I've done several of those. You don't permit those through the Board of Health.
Yeah,
It's through
testing.
it's through DEP.
Right, but when it comes right down to it, and I'm looking at where the zone 2 is, or the zone A. I'm also looking at where you're saying that you did, you put in the wells. You're within 100 feet of the wetlands, roughly. And wouldn't Concom have had something to do with this? Disturbance within 100 feet of a wetland?
I'd probably defer to Mike Toohill, as I understood it when you're doing due diligence. But that's more of a Mike Toohill question.
Yeah, testing on my half for septic systems and such like that, doing test pits within, buffer zones of a, wetlands is typically normal happenings. It's disturbance in the fact of you're changing the landscape or you're causing modifications. But having, testing is typical, when you go out and you actually discover what a wetland is, you have to test the ground and you have to get access to the site there. And those are, standard parts of a lot of engineering design. I can't speak to what is specific for wells and the drilling of those, but test pits for other types of systems within, resource areas is required to even discover that it is a resource area.
No, that's understood. Do you have a copy of the town's well regulations?
That, like Rick said, that was done by on-site.
Okay, so neither of you guys have a copy of the town's regulations on wells?
I don't.
Okay, I don't know if they exist. I don't think the town has any. I'm just posing a
Oh.
question.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
I
it's
have
a
no
trick
idea
question.
what the town does. So, Mr. Tanzi, do you have, do you want to keep going? I know you have a lot on this.
Well, usually a well driller obtains some type of a permit from the Board of Health or files something at the local level with the Board of Health. It's usually a report on the depth of the well, the drawdown of the well, whether or not the well was dry, where did the well stabilize at, how long did it take for the well to stabilize after it's been pumped down for X amount of gallons, or how much time there has been. There's information on the yield of the well. I mean, I've seen these all at local Board of Health.
Yeah, so that might be for standard drinking water wells to be installed. These are, Rick is currently testing and doing a submission as a test to see if it is capable. If you're installing an actual drinking water well that is going to be going into service, then those permits and all of those are typically done. And Rick went through DEP due to the fact that it is going to be, that it is for a larger scale operation rather than just a local domestic, single home well.
But it is.
So what he's saying is they're trying to figure out if it's going to work. They're not actually trying to put this into play. They're just trying to see if it's going to work. I mean, does that make sense? Is that a fair assessment?
It is.
Yes. My question is, are you going to do any water testing at this point to see if there's any kind of contamination in this water? Because I'm sure we're all well aware that there's contamination over at Hingham Street. So
yeah, there's no contamination, Chairman. And we even, you don't typically do this, but given the town's experience, not long ago, we actually went in and tested for PFAS in addition to everything else that you would normally on-site tested for everything else, which is part of their protocol with DEP. PFAS is not protocol with DEP, at least at this stage. We went in and tested and didn't see anything. Part of that may be the fact that the PFAS into the reservoir, and this is purely my opinion, is coming from surface water issues, commercial, wherever it's coming from, I don't know. But it's not coming from the vein, that is on this site. So that was good news.
Oh,
how do you know that?
Yeah, that was my question.
I'm sorry?
How do you know that?
How do I know what?
How do you know that it's really, again, if you had, what you're insinuating, and maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're insinuating that based on the test results that you have right now, the water that's coming from the wells that you're doing testing on have nothing to do with the Hingham Street Reservoir.
No, I didn't mean that. No, I didn't mean that at all. Sorry for the miscommunication. All I meant was that the PFOS in the reservoir is not coming from those wells. That's it. So,
Alright.
because there is no PFOS in those wells. That doesn't mean they don't communicate with the reservoir. I honestly don't know that answer. So, but the PFOS is not coming from those, from the bedrock below our site.
Gregor, does that make sense? Yes, no, yes?
It's totally inconclusive.
Okay.
My concern has always been with this site is contamination. This site was a former junkyard. I have never seen a junkyard come back, get tested, and be clean and have levels that are undetectable. The last time we met, and I believe that was back in October, I expressed some real serious concerns about contamination on this site, in the testing protocols that were performed on this site, and the reporting by the company, I believe it was Ty and Bond. Whoever wrote that report put in there, and I said this at the last meeting, they put in their report that this report may not pass a regulatory audit. It also had stuff in it that it admitted that not every area of the site was tested, and it implied that they weren't allowed to test in certain areas. And they were very vague about why they weren't allowed to test in certain areas, why they didn't test in certain areas. And as regulators, right, the standard of care for an applicant is to provide clear and convincing evidence to the regulatory authority, in this case it's the zoning board, that public safety will not be compromised. We have PFAS in this reservoir. We have all kinds of tributaries surrounding your site, which is in a zone A, which has some very strict regulatory hurdles. And I'm looking at your plan and I don't see any of those tributaries even on this plan, which raises a red flag in my opinion. And it doesn't put to rest or convince me that this drainage system is not going to compromise the water quality of our reservoir. Now, I've said this back in October, and months have passed, and all my concerns have not even been raised by now. They haven't been addressed by now. As far as I'm concerned, it appears that they have been swept under the rug, for lack of a better word. I mean, if I was you, this contamination concern would be the first thing that I would have had tested with a representative of the town to prove that it is clean. If it's not clean, to do the remediation work necessary to make it clean. I just don't get it. I mean, if I was a developer, that would be the first and foremost thing, knowing that my site is surrounded by a Zone A aquifer protection area that was formerly a junkyard. And I have never seen a junkyard come back so clean as what is being represented to this board. And then when you read what was in the report in writing, and it's all covered with, cover my backside clauses, and we're not going to be held responsible if we find contamination. We didn't test here. We only tested here. We had non-detectable limits that came back. Well, and then they say, this test, we can't guarantee that it would pass a regulatory audit. I mean, how am I supposed to approve a project with a document like that? To a reservoir? I mean, two towns drink out of this water. It's already compromised with PFAS. And you're proposing all this impervious area, and then you propose to dispose of storm or mitigate and manage stormwater, from what I can tell, through recharge. Now, a contaminated site, the last thing you want to do is recharge. In fact, you want to pave it and make it impervious so that you don't get any recharge, so that you can't get a migration of contamination. I about a year ago, I pushed to have this site tested with a representative of the town to find out exactly what we've got. If there's an issue, then maybe it can be resolved. Maybe it can be cleaned. If there's not an issue, then at least it's a concern that's put to bed. But to just not address it, of a reservoir, a junkyard, potential contamination, getting recharged into a surface water, drinking water supply, it's unfathomable. It just makes absolutely no sense at all. This is a serious issue, and it's not even being addressed. So this issue is not going away with me. I'll tell you that right now. I don't know what's going on with that report, why it was written there, but this town has had no representation witnessing how those tests were sampled, where they were sampled, what frequency, what depths, and what came back as a result. I mean, we need to have some representation as a town of Rockland, as for this board, to make sure that testing protocols for contamination on this former junkyard site will pass an a regulatory audit, that they will pass a regulatory audit, that everything out there has not triggered reportable results, or if they have, you take the necessary options to clean it up. I mean, this is just common sense. It's not something that the board isn't, and it's not their purview to ask for. This is our job. This is our obligation to protect this town. And I've got real concerns that you, Mr. Lincoln, are not taking my concern serious. If you had taken it serious, you'd at least be showing the tributary areas and the associated Zone A aquifer protection areas on the plan, and how they relate to where your wells are located and your stormwater recharge units are located. I don't see, on the plan that I'm looking at, this would be the perfect plan to show the tributaries, to show the Zone A areas, showing the recharge units and the wells. I'm done, Mr. Chairman. I've said my piece.
Mic drop, Mr. Tanzi. Thank you.
Can I follow up on Mr. Tanzi's point?
Mr. Baker Jr., please do.
Thank you, sir. In my professional life, I've seen a lot of reports that have typically contained disclaimers. I can honestly say I have never seen a report, the proportion of which constitutes a disclaimer that is as high as this. You are looking at 7 substantive paragraphs of disclaimers covering almost 2 pages. And forgive me for reading this, it's just so much, I couldn't commit it to memory. But if you look at the end of the report, and again, as I referenced, 7 paragraphs of disclaimers regarding the accuracy of the findings of the report on such topics as subsurface contamination, remediation of subsurface contamination, the reliability and or accuracy of the information and data they relied on in preparing their report, whether the applicant had submitted to the reporting entity all of the relevant information needed for Ty and Bond to do their study. As Mr. Tanzi already referenced, questionable whether, it's questionable whether PFAS were included in the analysis, and they make no guarantee, as Mr. Tanzi mentioned, that the report will pass a regulatory review. Every one of these disclosures, I would suggest, are enough to suggest that we need to take a very careful look at this, and actually, and I forgive me for the harshness of this term, of questioning every bit of information that's been submitted to us by the applicant. I mean, it's fundamental. I mean, architecture is one thing. It's great that the project looks nice. It's wonderful that it has grass, not too much on the recreational amenities, but the safety not only of the residents of this proposed project, but the safety and health of the residents, visitors, business people of 2 towns, as Mr. Tanzi said, seems to have been not addressed in any significant way by the applicant. Now, I realize I'm a non-voting member of this on this particular matter, but Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate as such to make a couple of requests?
At this point, when it comes to requests specific to, we're not talking conditions or any kind of, we're talking, let's take it one step at a time. Let's take it one step at a time. Mr.
Okay.
Baker, please. Talk to me about requests.
All right, one request that I would have is that the applicant, prior to our next meeting, provide all documents from the DEP authorizing the digging of the wells to which he referred.
Absolutely.
Okay. Second request, similarly, prior to our next meeting, that the applicant provide to us all the data and information used by Ty and Bond in preparing their report.
Absolutely. Assuming he can get it, because as far as I know, this is, Mr. Lincoln, you might be able to correct me on this one. You've parted ways with Ty and Bond, correct?
I have, and I don't want to interrupt Mr. Baker Jr., but I mean, Conoco did a full phase 2 before Jones Street. Even phase 2 is subsurface and full report and found no issues. Jones
All right,
Street thing.
So
Yeah,
you
go
have
ahead.
some information that you can work with at this point.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Baker Jr., please continue 100%. I'm on your,
Yeah, I mean, my concern particularly is, regardless of any other reports that have been prepared, content of the Ty and Bond report. If Ty and Bond did that work at the behest of Mr. Lincoln and was paid by Mr. Lincoln, whatever information they did or gathered in the preparation of that report, I would suggest as a matter of law, he's entitled to. So he should be able to get it to us.
Sorry, this is Rick again. I didn't pay for that. I mean, it was purely, I can try and get it.
Who paid for it?
At a minimum, it would give us more test locations, which would kind of add to Conoco's initial subsurface report. So I can give it a shot.
Well, who is the client?
Jones Street.
Did you pay Jones Street?
No,
No, there's no way that worked.
nope.
No way that worked.
But like I said, I'll see what I can do to get whatever I can from them. I can certainly, resurrect Conoco's phase two. And we can go from there.
Mr. Baker Jr., how do you feel about that?
Well, I guess something's better than nothing, but it doesn't come close to satisfying my concerns about the content of that report.
I agree with you. The tie and bond report was very, very specific, and then in that it wasn't very specific.
Yeah.
There was way too many caveats to take that serious.
I mean, and I'm not suggesting that this is the case, but it almost reads like when this thing goes to hell, it's not going to be our fault.
I agree 100%. That's exactly how I read it. And that was the impression that I got. And I have a real problem with that because in essence, it's saying, hey, you're going to have a tragedy out there. And I'm just, covering my backside. You can't come suing me when it does that because, and then it's just finger pointing. I don't know if this is right. I don't know if I used good data. I don't know if I was supplied good data. Well, quite frankly, as a professional engineering outfit, it is their obligation to do due diligence to make sure that the information that they're using to write a report is good information. And to do their due diligence and do their research to make sure that they're working off of sound information. Passing the buck hardly qualifies as clear and convincing evidence. This report has convinced me that we're going to have a real horror show on our hands when this thing if this project gets built. I want to know what the status of that site is from a standpoint of contamination, and I want to know. I want a qualified representative of Rockland watching all those testing to make sure that the testing protocols will pass a regulatory review or a regulatory audit, that it will be done to ensure that the town is protected. You can't play Russian roulette with a reservoir. You just can't do it. It makes absolutely no sense. If we were to allow that to happen, we would be remiss. And we need to take this serious. This is not something that can be swept under the rug. This isn't a NIMBY situation. This is a serious, legitimate concern. A reservoir is a legitimate concern. A contamination from a junkyard surrounded by a Zone A surface water protection district is a very serious matter. It is a legitimate matter. And it needs to be verified. End of discussion. We've been going on for how many years? And we're coming to a situation like this, and this whole issue has been swept under the rug, meeting after meeting after meeting. No more. We got to get to the bottom of this. These are answers we have to have. We have to have it. It should have been done a year ago.
Mr. Chairman?
Who is that? Is that Mr. Baker Senior?
Yes, it is.
Yes, sir. What can I do you? What can I do you for?
Is it proper that I make a motion to have a new environmental review done and testing, or a 21E done on this property where the original report is inconsistent?
Inconclusive?
Inclusive to the information that we are looking for?
Mr. Tanzi, would you say that? Would you say that the current report by Time Bond is kind of inconclusive at this point? I know they come up with some conclusions, but I don't know if we can trust them.
Yeah. The way I read it, that report is conclusive that we're gonna have problems and that they've covered themselves. They've covered themselves
Okay.
6 ways to Sunday. And it's just not a document that a professional would put out. Quite frankly, I would be, I don't know if I'd be embarrassed to put out a document like that. I'd be scared of getting sued. And as a person with a conscience, I wouldn't just say, well, you know, hey, your reservoir's, you know, has got all kinds of problems, but, you know, I've covered myself. Don't come suing me. It's, you know, look at me. I've pointed all the fingers at everybody, you know, and the information that I was supplied wasn't right and blah, blah, blah. And even that's not an excuse. As a professional, you have the obligation to make sure that the information that you are being supplied is correct and to do your due diligence to know that it's correct and thorough and complete. But to put something in that document that says we didn't test the entire site and to make allusions that they weren't allowed to test in certain areas and not say why they weren't allowed to test in certain areas. I mean, right there, that's a problem. I mean, if you're not going to test in a certain area, you're probably not going to test in the areas that need to be tested.
Attorney Galvin, can you ring in here? Can we require this?
You can require them to provide you what information they have, and you can have it peer reviewed, but that's it.
Wait, we can't have this site tested and have our representative.
Well, it's already been
Watch the
tested. My understanding is it's already been tested.
Yeah, but you got to read the test results.
Mr. Galvin, have you read the tie and bond report?
No, I have not. I have not read the tie and bond.
I think you need to. I think you need to.
You guys need to read it. You're the ones that decide this, not me. I've read enough about it that clearly we can have it peer reviewed.
I want the site tested, and I want a representative of Rockland making sure that all areas of the site have been tested and that they've been tested to protocols and standards that would pass a regulatory audit.
Mr. Tansey, let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you. I'm sorry, sir. Let me just interrupt you real quick. Mr. Lincoln, have you read the test report? Have you read this?
So let me back up 1 second. The short answer.
No, sir, please answer my question. Have you read it?
The short answer is no, because I didn't commission it. I wasn't involved. Conoco's report, I did read.
Okay, why do we have, and again, do we have a copy of this Conoco report?
You should have, and like I said, like Greg alluded to, I mean, it has been a while, so I've forgotten, but we've submitted all of that data. I will say, I get the distrust of the big fancy engineering firm with all the disclaimers, and I'm not going to defend them. But I will say the one disclaimer where they talk about the regulatory audit, that is fairly common in the environmental business. And what that really means is that DEP on all these sites, when these reports get filed, have the right to come in and audit. Can be 3 years, can be 7 years, can be 10 years. And it's no different than a CPA firm with their disclaimers that, you know, they may give an audit on a firm, but they're not going to guarantee that there's been no embezzlement. You know, that's all they're saying. They'll defend their report with DEP, but they can't state with any guarantee that DEP won't arrive and make them do more work. That's all that means.
Respectfully, Mr. Lincoln, a 9-paragraph disclaimer is not typical in any endeavor.
That's not.
Yeah, the rest of the disclaimers I'm not going to defend, you know.
Okay. So let's do it. Let's do this. We already don't trust that tie and bond thing. So if you can get us, just refresh us with the Conoco version of the environmental report. If you can refresh us with that for next meeting, you know, as soon as you can, we'll be able to take a look at that. The next thing is and again, I'm not trying to hurry this up because it's a major concern. We do have to talk about Pat Brennan looking at this. And unfortunately, I don't know if Deb has the information about what's still in the account and what's Pat working off of right now. I mean, I never prepped you for it, so I didn't think it was going to be there. So we need to look at that account and see what's in there. Because if there's not enough money to cover his additional review time, additional meeting time, then we're gonna have to look at that. Mr. Lincoln, if I have Deb look in that tomorrow, communicate with Mr. Brennan tomorrow, see what kind of money we're looking at. Can we replenish that fund if necessary?
Sure, just let me know.
All right, Deb,
Rob, can I interject?
Oh, absolutely.
So what this is, we moved forward with Jones Street on a lot of things. We're actually back with a sort of, we need to pull a lot of stuff out of our binders and go back to some of the initial stuff that we had. And we really need to sort of reset. And that was very clear with the documents we have here.
Oh, absolutely.
So one of the things that developed with Jones Street that just came up again now that we need to just have a very specific conversation about, which is all of the environmental questions are clear. Like we've discovered they're beyond Pat Brennan's capability and scope. They're too specific, too much going on. We talked about it beyond the existing environmental problems. We went one step further to talk about the fill coming onto the site, that it's not enough to say that it meets certain testing criteria. We want our own consultant to tell us that the testing protocols for the soil that's coming on are going to satisfy the requirements of this particular site in this particular town. So this is the moment where we're resetting ourselves to the beginning. We need to have that peer reviewer selected, vetted, and paid for, so we can get them on now. Jones Street dragged their feet on this issue, and we need to do this now. So this is not Pat Brennan. This is our own environmental consultant, and we need Judy to help us locate, get the estimate, get that estimate to Rick, get the okay to bring on that environmental peer reviewer, because it's just beyond Pat Brennan's capabilities for us.
Tim, I'm gonna tap on to what you're saying. The same thing happened with the peer review on the pro forma. Jones Street failed to get what was his name? Brett Pelletier. He was the one that was reviewing the pro forma. Jones Street basically, I'm not going to say they refused, but they never got him some of the documents he needed to complete his analysis. And in turn, the final paragraph of his analysis of the pro forma was, I have no answers, because they refused to get him any of the documents he needed to be able to conclude if they need a fifth floor or not. So I don't know if that's called into play, if that's called into play at this point as well. There's a lot of things from the Jones Street days that are coming back to haunt you, Mr. Lincoln. So I'd like to know how you want to handle that.
The financial review? Go ahead, Walter.
Rick, can I take that for a second? Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
can I make a suggestion that we have Conoco resubmit or newly submit all of their environmental information. The board take that information with the help of their folks, Judy Barrett maybe being that person as Mr. Haynes identified, retain an LSP to peer review it to the extent that it requires peer review. And then we set aside a period of time at a future meeting where Conoco brings its LSPs to the hearing. The board's peer review LSP consultant shows up at the hearing. Hopefully the board, including Mr. Tansey, have had time to review and digest it, and we can all have a group dialogue about these issues. I think,
Tony, that's a beautiful idea. That is
I
a
think it was
beautiful.
heading that way, and I think Mr. Haynes is right. It sort of got pushed off the track a little bit when Jones Street came off, but I do think there was an agreement to head in that direction. So why don't we just put it back in that direction? Having done this, I mentioned to you guys before, I chaired my board in my hometown for 20 years, and we've come across a few of these issues, and that's the way we've handled it. I think it gets the pros in the room together, along with the board members who can ask their questions and become educated, and as well as educate others.
Agreed.
Mr. Lincoln, are you gonna have an issue with that? Because obviously that peer review is gonna end up getting paid by you.
That's fine. It's not a complicated peer review, so.
All right. No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Greg, Mr. Baker, Mr. Haynes, everybody, Mr. Galley, Mr. Baker Senior. Does everybody agree that I think that's the way that this should go? I'm seeing a lot of head shaking today, and I'm going to say yeah. All right. Well, we're going to have to look for an LSP between Greg, between yourself, Tim, myself, with Pat Brennan. I know we can come up with somebody that'll be impartial. Mr. Lincoln, if you can make sure that all of that stuff from Conoco is resubmitted, so we can get that put together. Again, I'm going to bring back up the pro forma and the fact that it's already been paid for, and the results were we couldn't come up with any results because they didn't give us the documents that we requested. Again, how do you want to handle that?
I cut 10% of the units, and I think I'm gonna reserve comment after that.
Okay. Because again, you're still not really proving that nothing has been given to us by yourself or Jones Street in the prior to you to prove that you need that fifth floor to make this project viable. And that's one of the things that's it's still in play at this point. So I want to make sure that everything it's as Tim says, this is kind of a redo. Because the other way to look at this is, let me ask a question. When you guys were first who did the civil engineering design of the site? Okay. Did you not know that Zone A was there?
The Zone A at that time, we did, I kept, per the design, I kept infiltration out of the Zone A. The drainage structures and stuff like that of that design was not interpreted that way, and how that Zone A, what they qualify certain structures as, and those types of conditions associated with drainage in a Zone A. So I followed the laws per the stormwater regulations as interpreted from the page.
Why is this being a problem? Then why is this a problem?
Damien, let me jump in. This is Rick, if you don't mind, Chairman. So this is really, and I ended up hiring a PhD out of Maine. He's been all over the world, the drilling down and not boring everybody to death. There were some blue lines, which now are called streams, drawn on the plan, not by the town, but by DEP.
They're coming from the quad sheets. Please don't talk down to me, sir. I use these almost every day. Right. So
I'm not talking.
I understand. Most of us understand this.
All
so
right.
There's some blue lines on there that are tributaries to the reservoir. And in turn, there's a 200-foot buffer around those that come from the Mass GIS website that you could easily download it and brought into your plan. Now,
But Chairman, all I'm saying is that, by DEP's rules, tributary banks, slopes, I'm not a scientist. There are no streams there. So it's this debate where if you drop a cup of water on one end and it eventually makes it to the other, even though it defies all of DEP's public definition, that's now a stream. It's not. So, but that is going to be a debate between us and
but
DEP.
my question at this point, though, my question is, did you go into it thinking that you were going to try and change this zone A, or did you not understand the zone A criteria in the beginning? I guess that's my question. I'm not an engineer, and I've learned a lot about this at this point, but there's only two ways that I look at this. Either A, you didn't know what was there, or B, you didn't know what criteria you could design by to work within that. So which one was it?
It's the second. Let's just say we've never heard of that DEP definition, the drop of water theory, quote unquote. That's a new one.
And there is a lot of ambiguity in regulations.
I understand that, but in the end, you're telling me you designed it per state rec. That's what you're saying?
Yeah,
that's what we thought.
Well, that's what we thought. Again, I've designs before have come back towards me. I designed to the standards to the best of my abilities, and certain regulations are interpreted in certain quantities. The regulations that I was following, I did not install infiltration systems or any of that were qualified in the zone A. There are other line items in the standards that can be interpreted in, of how it's said and done in that fashion. In my original design that I submitted a long time ago, I did not install stormwater facilities within a zone A that were not allowed per the interpretation that I had.
Okay. So based on the interpretation right now, can this site be built based on state law?
The site as built currently, it's based off of the zone A. So that is the situation at hand that I think Rick was trying to explain. Again,
per the zone A regs, which is, as far as I know, state law, can the site be built and drain the way that you have it designed?
Per my original design from that time, I'm working through the drainage design as the plans have shown of getting them to those locations, showing infiltration outside of 200 feet of the zone A, as per that, those systems are still all there.
You're working to change the design.
Yes, the plans shown are shown as draft. We are working from them to change them as, flipping the building, getting the drainage to work.
Okay, so you were planning to redesign the drainage to not drain into the 200-foot buffer, the zone A as shown on Mass GIS. And that way you would not be subject to anything that we have to deal with when it comes to zone A. Basically taking it out of play. Is that correct?
We are working through that process. If we come to a point where that is impractical, we will proceed as such.
Okay. All right. We're gonna have to, Deb, we're gonna rely on you a little bit here. Mr. Lincoln's gonna get you some documentation. Gonna need to put that in a separate file on the website so it's publicly available. Greg, Tim, myself, Mr. Galvin, Attorney Galvin rather, I'm sure we can come together and find an impartial LSP to review the documentation of Mr. Lincoln. is gonna provide. We're gonna need somebody to reach out to them. Once we figure out who it's gonna be, Attorney Galvin, do you want to do that? Reach out to them, or would you rather have Deb do it? Muted.
There's
There
a
you go.
company right down the street, Vertex Engineering. They're an LSP. A lot of towns in the area rely upon them. They've got a ton of experience as LSPs. There's another company out of Norwood called GZA. They're another one that's fairly close by, another one that employs a number of LSPs with a specialty in this type of area. Either one of those companies is who the most towns are using.
Okay.
There's another company that I've worked with, Webb, and they're local. I think they're out of Norwell as well.
All right, so it sounds like we got to get, we're gonna get a couple people involved. So we're gonna need, again, we're gonna need all that documentation, all the Conoco documentation. Put that together. We're gonna contact a couple different people, get an estimate. We'll forward that estimate over to Mr. Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln can then either approve or disapprove. Either way, we're gonna have to have an amount of money to fund the engineering, I think, because again, I don't know the estimate. I don't know what's in the engineering account at this point. So we're gonna have to review the engineering account, talk to Pat Brennan, get his estimate on what it's gonna take to do that. So there's a number there. We're gonna have to get a number from the LSP. So there's a number there, but we can't do that until we get the documentation.
There's our architectural and design review.
That's again, it's up to Mr. Lincoln if he wants to pay for this. We do have the right to request it.
Let's stick with the environmental first and see if we can get through it. The architect, I'd love to put BKA in, with have a chat with somebody, but honestly, I'm not it's not de minimis, but I just one step at a time, if you don't mind.
I appreciate that. I absolutely do appreciate that.
That was a peer review that we had. And so it's somebody who's on board. It's just we have all new architectural. So it's okay to defer it, but it'll just make the process go that much longer.
So Mr. Lincoln, from what I'm hearing, you want to take care of you want to look at the engineering and environmental stuff first.
If you don't mind, please.
Tim, does that work? Because again, we're gonna have to look at a pro forma too, because we never got answers on the last one.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think it's good we will have a conversation about the things that we would expect as we move along. The timing of, the pace at which we go is determined by when we get information, and then having a peer review with that information, and then coming back with a response. So,
no, I agree with you. The only real review that we've had thus far, I think, is from the fire department. Is that correct? That's the only thing. That's the only thing that we've had thus far, and that was taught. There was a lot of talk of the interiors, the interior of the building. What was it about the exterior, the water lines or something like that? The hydrants? Is that what
they have to be looped. They can't be dead ended.
All right.
Water lines.
Let me ask a question. Is that something that can be adjusted on the current plan set and gotten to Pat Brennan? So at least we can say that you guys have complied thus far with fire, and then he can just start looking at everything. Is that something you can do, or do you want to take care of that after Pat makes all his recommendations?
Are we talking about the looping of the water or all of fires?
Well, when it comes down to all of fires, a lot of that had to do with interior, interior stuff, and we don't have any floor plans to really look at.
Oh, the architecture is not off of my purview.
Yeah, see, and it's the only thing, again, correct me if I'm wrong, and let me look at the letter again here. Fire. Rock and fire, blah, 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 both with sprinkled, standpipes and stairwells, install means a fire alarm system, bi-directional amplifier, no idea what that is, fire hydrants, okay, fire hydrant system, systems plans and specifications for fire hydrant system shall be submitted to the fire department for review and prior. That you can't do, and I don't think that's something that Pat would look at anyway, it's not on the plans. It would be on the plans, but that's something that you're gonna have to do for the fire department. Fire department access roads shall be provided and maintained in accordance with this. That's still provided and maintained. Yeah,
Number 5, Rob.
I'm looking at that. I mean, it's. Can they, and again, I'm not an engineer. Can that be done prior, in a quick amount of time? Mr. Dimitri? Is that something?
I'm pulling up the fire notice right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I apologize. I thought everybody had this.
No, I do have it. I don't have it up on my screen currently.
Understood.
Number 5, fire hydrant system plans and specifications for hydrant system to be submitted to the department for review and approval prior to construction.
Anything that's on there that pertains to the plans that Pat Brennan would be reviewing, do you want to try and attack this before it goes to Pat? Or do you want him to take this into consideration when he's doing his review?
Yeah, the fire hydrant systems, I can pull together any information for those on site. I will note that that last line of that, where no dead end waterways that the fire main the water should be looped. We currently do have it shown this way coming up and through the site. So that's already been answered.
Okay.
But
All right, so
as far as
what
the other stuff, that's just details. That shouldn't be an issue of pulling together.
All right, what I'm gonna suggest at this point then, what I'm gonna suggest is don't touch it. Don't touch it. We're gonna basically supply Pat Brennan with a copy of the site plans, a copy of any other, anything else that comes in. I think that's the only thing thus far that's gonna come in. So we'll give him the site plans, the fire letter. He'll start reviewing everything based on that. And then, I'm thinking we can give him, we can give, the zoning board can give permission for you guys to talk back and forth. Maybe if there's time, you want to take care of some of the stuff prior to the meeting, prior to him coming back, try to speed things up. Because are we like 2 years into this now? I mean, that's what it feels like. I mean, it feels like a very long time. So if we can try to speed this up, however it lands, however this happens, it would be nice. So, Mr. Lincoln, does that work?
Yes, sir.
Giving permission for Pat Brennan and your engineer, it's Mr. Dimitri?
Yeah, Dimetruk.
Dimetruk?
Dimetruk.
Yeah, I like it. All right, Ward, is that okay? Can we? Do you think we can allow Pat Brennan and Conoco to talk back and forth to try and speed some of this up?
So
Is that fine? All right, so that's fine.
and don't forget, not needed now in the interest of kicking a few things as information develops, but we did have a traffic study, and as amount of parking, number of units changes, will at least want some review on the changes. It's certainly not going to be an extensive traffic study as we had, but there's somebody to review.
That's Gill and Associates. So we're gonna have to have Pat. Have Mr. Gillen look at the plans, come up with a number for review purposes. So I'll gladly call Pat tomorrow morning, so he's aware of this. Deb, there's gonna be money coming in for Pat Brennan, for Gill and Associates. Basically 3 checks. I think that's how it should be. 3 individual checks, 1 for engineering review, 1 for traffic study, and 1 for LSP.
What about Bob Galvin?
Mr. Galvin, want some money?
It's actually not permissible.
Oh, okay.
I wish it was.
Better get your page, Bob.
It's, look at, I'm just saving you, you know, an answer that I've already got multiple times, so.
Mr. Galvin, do you have anything to say at this point? Because I think we've exhausted everything, and we all know that this is kind of a.
No, we'll help you get the appropriate person to read the tie and bond report. What I was looking through on my notes is to see whether that tie and bond report was ever submitted to me, and apparently it was submitted to the Conservation Commission. So when Mr. Tanzi asked me if I had read it, I hadn't read it because I hadn't been involved in anything involving the commission. So, but it should be reviewed by someone that knows what it means, and an LSP is the appropriate person to tell the board what it means.
Yeah. All right. All right. Do we need a motion for all this?
Just one more thing, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Baker Jr.
It's my understanding that Mr. Lincoln has agreed to provide prior to the next meeting on this matter, all documents from the DEP related to the 3 wells that were dug, and any information and data he can get from Ty and Bond that went to their report.
Mr. Lincoln,
Yes, sir.
confirm that you're going to be able to do that.
I don't know about time. I don't know about, yes. I don't know about Ty and bond stuff. I'll do my best. But
Okay.
But we will get Conoco's testing.
yes, that should have already been submitted, but I'm going to submit it again, so it's current.
Probably has been, but again, when you look at the number of documents that we have supplied, even on the just on the website, there's a lot. Let's leave it at that.
Understood.
So if that's something, and honestly, if it's an easy forward via email, and I'd rather do it that way. Just keep it simple for everybody. All right. So again, Attorney Galvin, do we need motions on any of this, or?
You'll have to continue the public hearing. You have an extension for the public hearing process through February 28th right now. So your next public hearing will have to be in advance of that date, or you'll need an extension.
Deb, what do we got for dates?
We're until like March,
We're into March at this point.
March 1st or March 15th.
Okay, we got nothing on March 1st at this point.
No, nothing.
All right. So if we continue to March 1st, we're going to need an extension on the decision making.
No, an extension for the public hearing, and probably makes sense to extend it through the end of March.
Okay. Mr.
I'll
Baker
get you that
Senior.
tomorrow morning.
Okay. Mr. Baker Senior, you want to make a motion here?
Do
We
we
need to
want
make
to hear
sure-
from the general
we-
public first?
We need to make sure we also hear from the applicant that they're willing to give us that extension.
True. And Attorney Mirioni already said that he was going to work on that tomorrow morning. That's what I heard, sir?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. Again, it's Mr. Baker.
Yes.
If you would like, we can definitely open it up to the public, but there's not a lot that there's not a lot that we're going to hear any different than we already know. That's my concern. And one of my big things is beating a dead horse.
I agree.
So at this point, we all know what the concerns are: environmental, the lack of water, the lack of sewer, the fact that the site is potentially contaminated, but we're going to have it reviewed. We don't like 5 floors. The traffic is going to be awful. We know all the concerns at this point, and to keep talking about it, it's just gonna belabor it. If somebody's got something different that we haven't heard of before, I'd be willing to hear that.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Chairman, there is one other concern. I mean,
Please bring it on. Bring it on.
You've read the police report, right? From January 7th. I mean, one of the concerns is, he says the Rockland, this was from the fire department. He says the first line, the Rockland Fire Department has multiple concerns with the shingle mill project. This project is at the edge of our response area, creating response times exceeding 8 minutes,
Okay.
well over the NFPA 1710 recommendation of 4 minutes. I mean, to me, that's concerning. With the mass of these buildings, you've got five floors of buildings of this mass at the edge of the fire department's response capabilities. He also went on to say that, it'd be difficult for responses from Hingham and Hanover, but he's saying it exceeds 8 minutes. And the recommendation of 4 minutes is what's considered safe. So this exceeds a safety factor of beyond 2. I mean, from 4 to above 8. That's more than double the recommended response time to a fire.
Oh, I absolutely agree.
And it's not like it's a single family resident. I mean, this is probably the biggest proposed residential complex, and it's still 5 floors high. I mean, fighting fires with a massive scale of a building like this is one thing, but getting that water up 5 floors to save lives and to put out a fire, there's some issues here. Now, I don't know how you overcome that.
The only thing I can say is the last sentence of that paragraph. Therefore, Rockland Fire will be requiring the following items to increase the safety of residents and firefighters in the event of the fire. That's why they're required, because of all that. And again, maybe I'm wrong, but I talked to Deputy Chief Heaney. Again, it's the last sentence of that paragraph. Therefore, this is what we're requiring. Because of everything that I just said, this is what the fire department's going to require. It's the way that I'm reading it. I could be wrong. But that's why he's making because of everything that he said in the paragraph. That's why the fire department is requiring everything that, numbers 1 through 13 on here. I'm not saying it's something that we can't look at. We have to look at that. We have to understand that. But that's why I think that's why Deputy Chief Heaney says all this.
And they get the connections out onto the Rockland Water distribution network. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's sounding like he wants this water main to be looped, because he says he will not accept a dead end water main for this project. The last sentence on number 5, the Rockland Fire Department will not accept a dead end water main.
I think Mr. DeBestrick already said that he looped it. I think he said he did. I know he said he did. I'm looking right now.
Yeah, I couldn't tell from the plans how it was being looped. I mean, when he says looped, he's not talking about looped within the site. He's talking about from point A of origin of the distribution network into the site, and then back out of the site into another point B into the existing distribution network. That is what a loop is.
Yep. So as I have shown here, we're coming from Rockland, the water, from, I can't show it, in detail there.
Pond Street.
Yeah, from Pond Street.
Yep.
Up, the main access, we're coming into the site and then back out into the
Tying into
to Rockland, into the water main here in Wilson. So it is looped.
Does that constitute a loop?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, it's looped back in. I'll have sites that come off the water main and go into the site and then right back into the water main at that. This is, we're actually accessing separated locations, and what I could loop it back up the main access, but that would be not as proficient or efficient.
What size water main are you proposing here? Is this an 8-inch?
I believe the water main size location connection to be coordinated with the Walkland Water Department. And that's all sized and determined by, what's necessary for the fire services, or, because the public supply or the domestic water is at fluctuation, right? So that information will need to be determined with the further design. But, installing a larger pipe is that.
Oh, what about the existing water main where you're connecting onto the private road? Oh,
Used to be 6-inch.
is that a 6-inch?
Yep.
6-inch, that's what it says.
The minimum, the fire department and the water department requires a minimum of an 8-inch, and it's a cement line ductile iron water main is what Rockland requires. Are you aware of that?
Yes. The 8-inch, I mean, we have a hydrant on it at 6-inch currently. And again, if it's 8-inch, we'll look at what's going on at the main access.
Basically, if the regulations state that you need an 8-inch, then.
Well, that's a minimum. I mean, you'll have to coordinate that.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're, I mean, I'm not sure as if they're gonna allow the loop to originate at an 8-inch and then tie into an existing 6-inch. And that loop has to have the capabilities. I mean, there's a lot of capabilities that loop is gonna have to provide for in order to extinguish a fire at 5 floors up, and on a scale of a project of this scale.
So basically, Mr. Tanzi, what you're saying is that if it's required, the water main in Wilson Street may have to be upsized.
It might. I mean, I'm not sure, but it's a possibility.
Mr. Dimitrick, I think that you understand where he's going with that. It may have to.
Yeah, understood.
That's cool. All right. So again, we need a motion to continue.
Motion to continue the public hearing to March 1st at 6:30 upon the receiving of a extension for the continuations.
Does that cover it, Attorney Galvin?
Yes.
You second?
Second,
I got a second. All right, roll call. Myself is yes. Mr. Baker Senior,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes,
yes.
Mr. Tanzi,
Yes.
motion carries. Mr. Lincoln, you have your list. Are you comfortable with the list?
I am.
All right. I think through the course of time, you may have my email address.
I think
I don't
so.
know if you have my.
I have it, Rick. I'll get it to you. I have it.
Okay.
If there's any questions, if there's any issues, if you need something, or if you think you're missing something, email me directly. Please tag in the zoning board as well. The zoning email. But tag me, just please tag me in there if I can help in any way, if I can refresh your memory in any way. If there's something that if you need the help, just reach out. I mean, this has just been a long process. Everybody's aggravated about the whole thing. I think everybody is. And if we can get this to the finish line somehow, regardless of what that finish line is, if we can get that there, then I think everybody will be a little bit happier. Does that work?
Appreciate it.
Not a problem. And again, we're also, it's not something we have to vote on, but we're going to allow Mr. Dimitrick to talk to Pat Brennan directly to try to get things solved prior to the meeting, so we don't have to come and hear all his stuff and just, you know what I mean? So if that makes it a little bit simpler, then so be it. And again, I'm gonna reach out to Pat in the morning and I'll tell him the same thing that we just talked about.
Okay, thanks for your time.
Not a problem, not a problem. Enjoy the evening, sir. Enjoy the evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. We'll see you on March 1st.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Good night.
We-
Oh, actually, yeah, before all my board members leave, motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Second.
I got Mr. Baker making the motion. I got Greg making the second. Roll call myself, yes. Mr. Baker Senior,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes,
Yes.
Mr. Baker Junior,
Yes.
Mr. Tanzi.
Yes.
Motion carries. Go home. Thank you, gentlemen.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Also,
Good
thank
evening,
you.
everyone. Thank you.